Hey guys, welcome to StudyIQ. My name is Prashant Dhawan and in this video we are going to talk about the Economic Survey 2018 Volume 1 Chapter 3. Let's begin. And for all of our new viewers, I would like to tell you guys that StudyIQ's pen drive and tablet courses are available for various exams. Whether you're preparing for SSC or bank, it doesn't really matter because StudyIQ has you covered. We will provide you the best courses and you can study at home. So visit this website studyiq.com and you can purchase the course of your choice. You will also find demo videos on studyiq.com as well. So visit this website and you can call these numbers as well for more information. So this right here is the chapter 3 of Economic Survey Volume 1. The title reads Investment and Savings Slowdown and Recoveries Cross-Country Insights for India. This chapter discusses how investment and savings slowdowns affects the GDP growth of a particular country, and of course in this chapter we shall discuss how India's growth has been affected by a slump in investment and savings. So just under this title in the survey they have given a very beautiful quote. The quote is, investment calls the tune, the profits dance accordingly. So it is the investment and how you invest that determines how the profits will eventually dance. That means how profit will eventually come. So this quote is by Hyman Minsky. Hyman Minsky will be mentioned more than a couple of times in this chapter. Let me tell you about Minsky. Minsky created the theory of financial instability hypothesis. His hypothesis got really famous after the 2007 economic meltdown. He argued, well, his main idea was very simple actually. His main idea can be summarized in just 3 words. Stability is destabilizing. It is mostly believed that to generate an economic crisis or a sudden boom, some sort of external shock has to occur. That's how we see economic crisis, some sort of external shock like oil prices going up drastically, or a region in the world suddenly getting tangled in war, or some other natural calamity has to occur in order to see an economic crisis. But Minsky disagreed, and he thought that the system itself could generate shocks through its own internal dynamics. Minsky believed that during periods of economic stability, when inflation is stable, when oil prices are stable, when everything is alright, Minsky believed that is the most dangerous period. He believed that during the period of economic stability, banks, firms and other economic agents become complacent. They assume that the good times will keep on going and they begin to take even greater risk in the pursuit of more profit. So the seeds of the next economic crisis are sown in the good times. Alright. Now, of course, in this chapter we probably won't be discussing this particular theory of Minsky, but I thought you probably would like to know about that. Later on in the chapter we shall read what Minsky said about investments and savings and how they affect the GDP growth rate of a particular country. So let's read the first few lines of the chapter now, shall we? Since 2010, people in India have been discussing that when will India's growth story reach the 8 and 10% growth period? When will that period ever return? Well, in order to understand this, first of all, let's just focus on gross capital formation and how much have we been investing in gross fixed capital formation overall. Alright. So if we look at the ratio of gross fixed capital formation to GDP, alright. So GFCF, GDP. So if you look at this ratio, in 2003, it was 26.5%. This was relatively alright for that period, but in 2007, when our economy was growing at a very rapid pace, before the economic crisis of course, the gross fixed capital formation ratio to GDP reached an all-time high of 35.6%, which is quite good. Now, as we are witnessing a slump in investment and savings and our economy isn't really growing near 8 to 10% as well, we have seen that overall the gross fixed capital formation ratio to GDP has also declined. Now some of you might be wondering, what exactly do you mean by gross fixed capital formation? Well, basically, in a nutshell, gross fixed capital formation measures the net increase in the fixed capital. Now, generally speaking, developing countries like India, China, Indonesia, Brazil, they tend to devote a higher percentage of their GDP to investment in fixed capital. Countries with rapid rates of economic growth are heavily investing in more fixed assets to enable rapid economic growth. Alright, China, of course, has one of the highest rates of gross fixed capital formation. You can see the gross fixed capital formation percentage of the GDP in this graph. This is not part of the economic survey. I'm just showing you so that you can understand the concept of GFCF. So China's gross fixed capital formation percentage or ratio to GDP is quite high. It's close to 45%, whereas India has always been around 29.5%. Now it has decreased to 26%, and you can see the more developed the country is, the lower their gross fixed capital formation ratio will be to their GDP. Ireland, UK, you will see these countries in the lower section of this list, and the Scandinavian countries like Denmark, Norway, they will have a very low gross fixed capital ratio to GDP. Now let's go back to the chapter. So the gross fixed capital formation ratio to GDP is something that you can write in your examination. Let's read this part, it's quite interesting. In fact, it was the boom of the early 2000s that was exceptional, as India climbed to about 10% real GDP growth, was accompanied by an unprecedented 9% point pickup in domestic savings and investment rates. So we can clearly see that our gross fixed capital formation to GDP ratio has decreased. Now let's have a look at the investment rates and the saving rates. Alright, so we saw an unprecedented increase in investments and savings during the mid 2000s, when our economy grew almost at 10%, and the subsequent slide in the investment and savings has merely brought these rates back to normal levels. Specifically, now later on in our country, the investments and savings rates have also slumped. Now let's read a bit more about it and find out why investments and savings in our country have also decreased. So have a look at this figure, it's quite interesting. This part here, this is how India's investments and savings have fluctuated over the years, and this part shows how the trend has been in other countries around the world. So the black worm here, this is the investment, the red one here, the red tape, it is the savings. Alright, now if you notice closely, between the 2000s, our investments and savings peaked. Alright, and after 2010, they have witnessed a slump. Well, it is because of various reasons. First of all, the inflation caught on very quickly, so people were not getting enough returns from their savings after the year 2010. The inflation was way too high, and it was impossible for people to keep on saving their money and keep on investing in financial instruments like FD or some other instruments. So people moved towards gold and real estate at this period, and that's why we saw a slump in savings as well. Now investment saw a slump because of different reasons, but in order to interpret this, we need to understand what exactly is a slowdown episode. Now here you can see the change in the composition of investment and savings in percentage points, of course. So this right here, this is the change in investments that we have witnessed since the year 2007-8 and now 2015-16, and this is the change in savings. Now what are the policies that affect change in investment and savings, that we shall discuss later on. First of all, just analyze this data, this table here. So we can clearly see the biggest change has been seen in private investments. So in percentage points, the change has been humongous compared to the public sector in investments, and in terms of savings, the change has been drastic as well. So based on table 1, we come to the conclusion that based on the breakup of the investment and savings that is available up to 2015-16, private investment accounts for 5 percentage points of the 6.3 percentage point overall investment decline in the year 2007-8 to 2015-16. So we have seen a slump in investment, and in terms of percentage points, it has been 6.3, and out of the 6.3, 5% has been from the private sector investment. Alright, the fall in savings by about 8 percentage points over the same period has been driven almost equally by a fall in household and public savings. This is quite important. And of course, inflation played an important part here as well. The fall in household savings has been in turn driven by a fall in physical saving, partly offset by an increase in holding of financial assets. Now in the chapter 1 of the economic survey, it was also mentioned that because of demonetization, this has happened, that people have shifted from the physical savings at home and now are moving towards more financial assets. But even then we have seen a slump in savings. So within the latter, there has been a shift from currency and bank deposits towards market investments via shares and debentures. And well, in order to analyze this, we also need to see what has been the trend of investment and savings in the last 40 years. So the next part of the economic survey reads, so what can we expect going forward for India's investment and savings, in particular for the country's prospect of reverting to sustained high growth? Now in this chapter, basically, we will try to find the answer that how we can cure this problem of a slump in savings and investment in our economy, and how savings and investments have fluctuated over the years, over the 40-year history of the Indian economy. We will just analyze the 40-year-old history, of course. The Indian economy is much older than that. So we shall analyze all these 4 points to investigate these issues. This chapter identifies episode of savings and investment slowdowns, studies their patterns, examines how investment behaves in the aftermath of a slowdown, draws policy lessons for revising India's investment slowdown and re-accelerating GDP growth. So now, in order to understand when we have seen a slowdown in investment and savings in our country, we must make some kind of a criteria, right? If we are saying that there has been a slowdown, how do we say that there has been a slowdown, right? We must set a certain benchmark. So in order to set a certain benchmark, we have created a formula here. First of all, what exactly is a shortfall? According to the economic survey, a shortfall is defined as a difference between A and B. So over here they have made a formula. This is just to understand the fall of investment and savings in India. So A over here is the average of investment in slowdown year and subsequent 2 years. So this is our A. We calculate this and then we reduce it, we subtract it from B. The B is of course the average of the previous 5 years, the average of the investment savings of the previous 5 years. Then of course this is the formula of a shortfall. This is how you will calculate a shortfall. Then after a shortfall, you need to find out what has been a slowdown year. So a slowdown year is defined as one where the shortfall in that year exceeds a certain threshold. So that threshold can be anything. They have given 3 thresholds here. So if we are to specifically identify a certain slowdown year in terms of investment and savings, we have identified 3 different thresholds. One is 2%, second one is 3%, and the fourth one is 4%. Most of the tables that you will see in the economic survey have been based on the 3% threshold. So we can say that if there are 2 or more consecutive slowdowns, then this counts as a slowdown episode. So this is the big one. This is something that we definitely want to avoid, a slowdown episode, because it means that investments and savings have been going down for a very long time now, for consecutive slowdown years. Alright. So now that we have understood this, let's move on to the data. So now that we have understood what exactly is a threshold, the 3% threshold, and what exactly is a slowdown episode, we can now analyze this very important table number 2. Over here we can see how around the world we have seen slowdown episodes in terms of savings and investment. So one thing that you can clearly observe here is that before the 2007 economic meltdown, there was a difference between the slowdown episodes in terms of savings and investments. So table 2 for the 3% threshold reveals that investment episodes are far more frequent than saving episodes. Alright, clearly you can see between the years 1975 to 1983, there were only 6 slowdown episodes in terms of savings around the world, whereas in investments we saw an upsurge of 14 slowdown episodes. This story kept on continuing until the year 2007, when the world faced a huge economic meltdown. since then, we have always seen similar slowdown episodes. There hasn't been a huge difference between the number of slowdown episodes of savings and investment. So, this pattern, however, has reversed after 2008, or you can say after the 2007 economic crisis, with saving episodes catching up with the investment episodes. Presumably, the relatively lower number of investment episodes in the latest period reflects concerted efforts in emerging economies to revive investment after global financial crisis via stimulus and other policies. So, by observing this data, we can clearly see that after the 2007 economic meltdown, we saw that how emerging economies like India, China, Indonesia, they started reforming their economy or introducing certain reforms or certain stimulus packages to help their various sectors, so that the sectors don't really see a slump in investment and savings. Now, why is this important? If we go back to chapter 1 of economic survey, you will remember a certain point where it was mentioned that if an economy experiences a slump in saving, then there are chances of a revival. Alright. But if there is a slump in investment, then the chances of revival decrease to a large extent. So obviously a slump in saving is bad, but a slump in investment is worse. So this is one thing that the emerging economies of the world have focused on, and they have been somewhat successful as well, because after, you can see, 2007, we have seen a decrease in the number of investment slowdown episodes. So now obviously we are going to ask ourselves, how does India, our country, fit into this broader picture? Well, usually India is always a special case, and India is a special case here as well. Until recently, when we have seen a slump in slowdown in investment, if we go back and see the history of slowdowns and slowdown episodes in various countries, you will not see any slowdown episode in India. Even when East Asian countries, when I talk about East Asian countries, of course I'm talking about China, South Korea, Japan, all these countries are East Asian countries. India is part of South Asia. So when the East Asian crisis had affected a lot of East Asian countries and their economies, there was a huge market crash during 1997. All these countries were facing economic woes. At that time, India did not really experience any type of slowdown in investment and savings. Actually, if we go back to 1991, when India faced its own balance of payment crisis, and after that we had to introduce the economic reforms, LPG, liberalization, privatization, globalization, even then we did not really see a huge slowdown in terms of investments and savings. Alright, so right now, as a result, the current slowdown that we are seeing in 2017-18, this is in terms of investment and savings both. Alright, there is a slowdown. This is first in India's history. Alright, so this is quite significant. Even then, slowdown is detected most fully only in the 2% threshold, that is the smallest threshold. You remember that we talked about the three threshold, 2%, 3%, 4%. So over here they have even given a very beautiful table number 4. So you can actually analyze how many times in India we have seen a slowdown in terms of investment and savings. So if we observe this through the 2% threshold, then obviously you will see there was a slump in investment in 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, 16. There was a slump in saving as well, 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, alright. But if we keep on increasing the threshold, you will see that, you will observe that the number of slowdown episodes tend to decrease. Alright, the more the threshold, the less amount of slowdown episodes you will see. So you can see that if we observe it from the 3% threshold, the number of slowdown episodes decrease tremendously. Then finally, if we see it from the highest threshold, the 4% threshold, there are hardly any slowdown episodes in terms of savings. There have only been slowdown episodes in terms of investment. So it's just a matter of how you perceive things. So here we see another figure, percentage of countries experiencing a slowdown from the 3% threshold category. So you can see that after the oil crisis, well, there was a huge oil crisis in the Middle East. There was a Gulf War in the 1970s. So because of that, there was a slump in investment and savings. We are talking about various countries around the world here. This isn't exactly the example of India right now, okay? So after that we see an increase in investments, and then there was always a huge fluctuation. I mean, when there was a slump in savings, there wasn't exactly a slump in investments. When there was a slump in investments, there was an upsurge in savings. So this kept on going up and down for a very long time, as you can see here as well. Investments are low, savings are high. So after the 2007 economic crisis, we have seen, as I told you earlier, this graph just sort of solidifies what we have earlier understood, that investments and savings slowdowns have sort of synchronized now. So what have we observed from all this data? Well, in very simple words, we have observed that India's current investment and savings slowdown episode has been lengthy compared to other cases around the world, of course, alright. Because according to all the thresholds that we analyzed, India hasn't really experienced a major slowdown in terms of investments and savings before the year 2010. So right now the slowdown that we are witnessing, it is quite long. It is not all that damaging as it was in the East Asian countries during the 1997 East Asian crisis. It is not that damaging, but it has prolonged for a very long time now, and it may not be over just yet. So now that we have diagnosed the problem that we are facing a slump in both investment and savings in our country, we need to find an answer, right? Well, first of all, we need to analyze how do we revive saving and investment, and should we focus more on saving or investment? Which one will be better for our GDP's growth rate? Alright, so this is what the economic survey asks as well. Should policies that boost investment, how do you boost investment? Well, obviously you boost it through an infrastructure boost. Bharatmala, Sagarmala, all these major infrastructure projects, they are there to boost investment. Alright, so the government of India is investing lakhs of crore rupees in all these projects to boost the investment so that they eventually boost the GDP growth rate as well. Make in India, ease of doing business, all these things are part of this boost in the investment process. But let me tell you a very interesting thing. Recently, India has seen a surge in its ease of doing business rating by World Bank. But let me tell you that this ease of doing business rating just takes into consideration two cities of India, Delhi and Mumbai. So India is obviously much bigger than Delhi and Mumbai. So we need to just keep that in mind as well. We shouldn't be overly excited that our ease of doing business ranking has improved, so everything is going well. There is still a lot to be done. So the issue is now about relative importance and urgency. Should we focus more on investment or saving? Well, both set of policies are crucial in the long run. In the long run, we need to have an increase in savings and investments. But if we are looking at the short term, like the next decade or so, then obviously we need to focus more on investments for the time being. Alright. So Roderick, a very famous economist, he provides evidence that simultaneous push may not be necessary. He said that if you want to increase the growth rate of the economy, it is not necessary that you need to improve the savings rate and the investments as well. Alright. So arguing that successful economic performance is not explained by saving transaction episodes. Okay. So based on these findings, Roderick, the famous economist, he proposes that policies should focus on encouraging investment. So now we are actually seeing that what the government is trying to do is backed by various economists around the world. Alright, rather than savings, we should focus more on investment to boost growth. Minsky, the guy whose quote we analyzed in the beginning of the chapter, also accorded primacy to the role of investments over savings in his analysis of macro financial developments. Now, that is why you are not really seeing an increase in the income tax slabs. Had the government wanted to help people increase savings, there would have been a huge increase in the income tax slabs, and mostly the middle class of India has been waiting for this income tax slab increase for a very long time now, right? And they have also been waiting for more benefits under Section 80 so that they can save more tax, and eventually thus it will help increase savings as well. So right now the government is not focusing on that. The government is, however, focusing on inflation, because we cannot just ignore savings altogether now, can we? If we keep our inflation under 6%, then obviously it will help savings as well. Alright, but for the time being, since income tax slabs are not being moved a lot, we aren't really seeing an upsurge in savings either. So this is the end of our video on chapter 3 of the economic survey. I will see you soon with chapter 4. Till then, goodbye, take care.